two, one. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Delusions of Grandeur. I am one of your hosts, but today we are continuing the path of Dane. You say it better than I do. What is the theme for this month?
Non-superhero comic adaptations, specifically Western comics, and we've covered comic books, graphic novels, and one comic strip adaptation, Dick Tracy, and now we're doing another one, which is Robert Altman's Popeye, based on the character of the same name who first debuted in newspaper strips at what was the year? 1919. So Popeye is over 100 years old.
Oh, wow.
And over to Brandon, who is hosting tonight's episode. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Popeye?
So we're talking about the Altman version of Popeye done in the 80s with Robin Williams. Of course, Popeye is a very interesting character, going from comic strip to comic book. I have actually a couple of those from my father's old stash. But with that, the movie is about a man looking for love. Sadly, he lost his father.
A very
long
special
ago.
kind of man.
He wasn't exactly looking for love. He was looking for his pappy.
Well, there you go. The love of a pappy.
Love of his father. Missing the love of his father, he braves hardships, drama, and romance in order to find his missing father and create the family he never knew he needed. I think that's a good description.
He overcomes a disability with his eye and some rather bizarre deformities in his arms, and achieves the love that he
It's not the
desires.
So why don't we go ahead and start with you, Dave? What's your first impressions? Is this your first time?
As far as the cartoon and the comic strips, I enjoyed those ever since I was a kid, and I even get a kick out of the fact that they actually banned a couple of episodes during the wartime. So you got to bear that in mind, that Popeyes was also dirty. So and racy as all heck at moments. So to me, it was one of the pivotal comics of the period because it bared no bars as far as comedy went. It didn't go as wild as Mad Magazine did, but it definitely was in the family of the Lampoon dynasty-ish kind of type comic strip. To me, the film, oh God, I saw it once years ago. I picked the film up just because I love Robin Williams as an actor. He is probably, to me, he is the best comedian and always will be the best comedian. And probably one of the best actors that there ever was. At least of the modern world, at least of the world that I grew up in.
Right.
So I'm not saying that he's the best actor now, but watching some of his films is a hell of a lot better than the comedy that goes on in this day and age. I have
that was hard to do.
I have differences of opinions in my mind about this film. On the one hand, I love Robin Williams and I don't mind his Popeye routine. On the other hand, his arms just don't live up to this day and age. His fur did, but whatever his arms were just didn't fly with me for some reason. I feel like they should have done a Lou Ferrigno with him instead of let's just put whatever flotation device underneath your arms and see if he floats on sea, you know. But
Well, they all float down here.
Olive Oil, Shelley Duvall was definitely skinny enough for the role, and definitely as annoying for the role. So to me, I think that they did okay, and I love the town. But as far as the movie, it should have never been a musical.
I'd forgotten it was.
On that note, I don't mind that song that he sings with her. With Shelley Duvall to Sweet Pea. Other than that, my first impressions of this movie were it was okay. I mean, it wasn't something to go wow about. I mean, at the time, I guess this was the best that they could do, but they could have done better, and they could have done.
Well, then it wasn't the best that they could do, could it?
Well, no.
If they could have done better, then
I would say, from what you're telling me, that your first impression is it was a disappointment for you.
Yes, it was a disappointment to me, and I guess it may have stood a test of time, but not my time, and I'm sorry that is my impression, but there you have it.
Don't apologize for how you feel about a film. I mean, shoot. After my first opening for Hell, was it From Hell? You can tell we got different opinions on these. So Dane, was this your first time seeing Popeye?
Practicing my Popeye face. Yeah, this is my first time seeing it. So this is my first time seeing it. My exposure to Popeye is next to none outside of what you readily see in pop culture, which is a surprising amount. You'd be surprised at how much of Popeye still persists in the culture even to this day. Now, this was apparently this film, was pretty hyped, and I had a little bit of background info as far as like it was the best that they could do and etc. So apparently this movie came about as a result of Paramount having lost the bidding war to do the Annie movie musical based on the comic strip. So they didn't get the bid, Columbia got it. And that movie apparently came out and was not very well received either. And yet has kind of achieved a little bit of a cult status also. But they lost the film. They didn't get the rights. They didn't get the rights, and so they said, well, what strip do we have the rights to? Popeye, boom, make it a musical. And, this film on paper, it's got, Robert Altman, it's got Robin Williams, Shelley Duvall, songs by Harry Nilsson, and it's got, a lot of heavy hitters. Robert Evans producing it. These are some pretty heavy hitters for their day. Apparently, they ran into a crap ton of problems in terms of production and things running over time, and them not having gotten everything shot, and Robin Williams having difficulties with Robert Altman, and he had to re-record all his dialogue. So the whole thing is basically a mess, production-wise. Comes out. It's not very financially successful. It had kind of a mixed critical reception, and it had two studios behind it. It had Paramount and Disney. This is partially a Disney movie. One of the very, very, very few times that they've ever paired up with another studio to share the load, which is saying a lot. And Paramount has the home video rights, so you won't find it on Disney Plus, as far as I remember. I haven't looked, but my impression based on all that was, despite all of those problems, I think that the end product is better than what a lot of people said that it was or said it would be. It's not a perfect movie at all. I think I think honestly it's at least 20 to 30 minutes too long. I think they could have cut a lot of stuff out and picked up the pacing a lot better. But the stuff that's good in it is really good. Like I think Robin Williams, one of the few times where he was cast in a role that already was very well defined prior to him coming along. They didn't have to like tailor the role especially to fit him like they did with the genie in Aladdin, where he's basically just being himself there. Here he's playing like a very clear established character and doing a very good job at it. And it does kind of, remind you that, oh yeah, he could be not only a really talented actor, period, but he could be a really talented comedic actor who wasn't necessarily doing his shtick, but he was also playing to his strengths with like doing the voices and the impressions and all that. Shelley Duvall, perfectly cast as Olive Oyl, probably the best casting in the whole thing. She clearly enjoyed doing this a lot more than she enjoyed doing The Shining, which came out in the same year. Even though this too had kind of a hellish production of its own, but it looks like she's having a lot more fun. I think the songs are kind of hit and miss. And I love Harry Nilsson in general, but the songs that are good in this film are really good, and some of them you even get a little teary-eyed as far as how good they really are. But overall, kind of a mixed bag, but overall positive.
All right, Jake, I know this isn't your first time seeing
it. Is not. It is not. This was you introduced me to this movie, which is kind of a strange bit because I am a huge fan of Robert Altman. I have seen a lot of his films dating all the way to MASH, all the way back up to his swan song, the brilliant swan song of that was horribly underrated, which was Prairie Home Companion, which incidentally was also one that featured a lot of music. Altman he goes for some strange places with some of his movies. And when I heard he did Popeye and Robin Williams was in it, I was like, how have I never heard of this? I was like, I must see this. And I think you probably actually showed it to me, I think. Yep. And my first impression was I was disappointed. It had its moments. Williams was a pretty interesting Popeye. I liked some of the one-liners, and the film does do a good job of incorporating. Like I did grow up with the Popeye cartoons. Like, I think almost anyone in my age group, we grew up with the Popeye cartoons. I mean, that was the thing. I don't know if I ever read the comic strip, maybe a couple here and there, but I definitely knew the cartoons. I knew the basic gist of it. I knew Popeye, Olive Oyl, Wimpy, Bluto. I knew some of the main characters. Probably some of the side characters showed up once or twice that are in the movie. So I wasn't going into it blind. And I guess maybe because of that, like Dane pointed out, Robin Williams was trying to do an established character. And he didn't really get to put his own stamp on it the way he often does. So I felt a little let down that it's like his first major film role, like his first starring role. So it's always fun to see where people come from, but I felt like we could have had more, maybe if he'd been granted more freedom or whatever. Shelley Duvall has a long history with Robert Altman. She's done a bunch of movies with him. So and she was, I think, perfectly cast as Olive Oyl. You couldn't get better. Oh, yeah. Like apparently they considered Lily Tomlin and some other people, and Lily Tomlin would have been a good choice, but she wouldn't have been as good. But and there were bits and pieces that I really enjoyed. Like I loved Wimpy's one line where the guy's like, "You're buying me a hamburger, or are you buying him a hamburger?" Well, I'm buying, he's paying.
Yeah,
I love that little line.
That line of Wimpy there, like that line of his is so famous. Of like, I'll pay you Thursday for a cheeseburger today. It's like that.
Right.
That's
yeah,
it's
exactly.
one of those lines that's so famous that it, I didn't really grow up with Popeye much, but I knew that line. I knew about the spinach, knew about a lot of just little isms.
I think probably the only line that's more famous from this is that I am what I am, and that's all that I am. That's but
I knew about that one too.
Yeah, but it's like I said. So my first time seeing it, I was disappointed, but I still liked it. Like I was like, it's interesting. It's like of the Altman films I've seen, it still entertained me a hell of a lot more than The Company did, and and more than Three Women did. It was flawed, but it was okay. I had forgotten it was a musical. I had forgotten it was a Disney co-production. Both of those things explain a lot, I think. But when we set the themes for this month and came up with the movies, I saw on the list 2 movies that I didn't have, and I think it was before Brandon set the schedule that I had ordered Popeye and Snowpiercer, and then they ended up being on the same night. So that's kind of cool that I ended up getting both of tonight's movies at the same time for the collection, which was really fun. And they also, they have a few things in common. I'm also a huge fan of the Snowpiercer director, although that's based off of one movie. Parasite was so freaking awesome. I couldn't wait to see more from him. But
we'll get to that.
We'll get to that in next talk. But basically, overall, my second viewing of this was, I think, more positive. Because I had reset the bar a little lower, there was more room for me to be impressed this time. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I still think it's a flawed movie, but it's fun.
So I first saw this many years ago. Mm-hmm. My father loved this film and showed it to me a lot. We actually got it on video cassette. So as a child, I got to watch this a lot. When I say a lot, I still have all the songs memorized. and I realized that today when I was rewatching it, because I was able to go through every line of it in my head before they even tackled it.
Wow.
Dane made this point a couple of years ago. In our National Lampoons and Scrooge discussion about nostalgia. So again, my impression is going to be shaded with nostalgia. There's no way to get around that. But coming from that point of view, I loved this as a kid. I thought Robin Williams actually resembled the cartoon character quite well because he had the little arms with the bulgy thing at the end, which was pretty much looked like the cartoon. Shelley Duvall, excellent to me, I thought the casting was just excellent all the way around. And I love the musical aspect of it. To me, this film is a fun, nostalgic trip from just in general. So I don't really have any I understand anybody who looks at it and doesn't like it or sees it and goes meh, but to me it does hold a lot of significance and specialty. And when I watched it again, I was surprised to feel that even though I hadn't seen it in a number of years, I think the last time I watched it was when I showed you my copy early on, and I was surprised to see it still held up for me. It was still very enjoyable. So,
well, I know that Dane said that the music was done by Harry Nilsson. Well, the 2 songs that felt like they went with the musical was or at least the story of Popeyes to me, because Popeye the cartoon was never a musical.
Well,
never. Not in the wildest dreams was Popeye ever a musical. It was always about Olive Oyl screaming, "Help, Popeye!"
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the thing, though. You got like
Bluto was always a character that was like the enemy,
Yeah.
and it seemed like he was always getting in a fight with Bluto, and the comedy slapstick humor in the cartoon didn't entirely adapt well to me on screen. As far as although as far as the boxing part, that part was entertaining.
Well, let's move forward on this before we get lost in the weeds. We don't want to get too far off. Right. So why don't we go ahead, and I'm going to stick more to the script. I'm going to actually start with characters instead of plot, but I feel like that's better.
Yeah, there's really much like the other Robert Altman film MASH. This film, the first like 2/3 of it doesn't have a plot really at all, and then it kind of finds a plot in the last third. MASH
is much more character driven. Well, most of his films are more character driven.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, let's talk about Popeye himself. So Robin Williams is Popeye. Dave has given his impression of him, and most people have given a surface impression. What do y'all think of Popeye as a character as a whole?
Well, one thing I'm going to throw out there, you were talking about the look of the character. One thing they neglected to do was to give Robin Williams an oversized chin.
But his chin was pretty good already.
Yeah, it wasn't bad, but he doesn't have like a Bruce Campbell chin or anything like that,
No.
But I think Popeye, actually, honestly, Dave was talking about this for the time and whatever. I'm not entirely convinced you could make a Popeye movie now.
You'd have to make it animated.
Popeye has some traits that maybe haven't aged as well as you could but he's a fun enough character. He's he's basically a good bloke, but one thing that I do think about, well, now that I think about it, is that South Park Russell Crowe fighting around the world.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. That was hilarious.
He always one thing, and I don't know whether this was Altman or Williams himself that did this. Now, Williams, I think, did put some of the over-top stuff in the performance. That really was a Williams spin on it. But the constant, talking under his breath.
Yeah.
Everything, that all it didn't amuse me as much as a child. But as an adult, I was laughing a lot at that.
Well, apparently that didn't amuse Altman because he had to redub a lot of the lines because they couldn't catch him on the mics. But it is in keeping with the character a little bit.
Well, Robin Williams had a tendency to ad-lib,
Yeah.
And apparently, so what they tried to kind of do Les Miserables before the film version of it. They tried to do that, 30 years before, as far as the live singing goes. They tried to do that, but the film audio in the on-set audio in the 70s, and this was technically 1980, so it was close enough, was generally pretty bad. I assume it's because the cameras were relatively noisy and everything. It's not really until you start to hit Star Wars and stuff, which even the episode 4 of New Hope, even that's pretty rough in the sound department, comparatively speaking. But it's not until you get around there that you start to get the sound mix is a bit more like what you'd expect to hear. They had to redub his lines, and that's why his lines always sound like they're so up close to the mic, because they are. And I kind of thought that at first, was that meant to make him sound more like a cartoon character, because I still need to watch the Popeye cartoons, but from what I understand, don't characters speak and their lips don't necessarily match up correctly, or that might be another cartoon character. I can't remember, but you saw a lot of that in this, and part of me wondered if that was intentional, but I think it was mostly just the fact that they had a lot of audio problems in the film as a whole. But it did give him the chance to basically do his lines over again, and you see him from like a long shot or a medium shot most of the time. There's not a whole lot of close-ups in this, so it's not necessarily a big deal. But performance-wise, I think he, again, it's not really a lot of his usual isms, but I just like that he was able to really sink into an established character, and not necessarily take it over, but rather just embody the character as written. He's overall, a good guy. He's just very rough around the edges. He's very idiosyncratic. He's very, honestly, like the opening of the film and his character as a whole reminded me a lot of The Man with No Name, specifically A Fistful of Dollars, because like the way that this opens is very similar to A Fistful of Dollars. The stranger who squints and speaks tough. He comes into this town where people hate him just because he exists, and he ends up getting into fights and all, just because he exists. It's like, oh man, that's total Clint Eastwood. I did think performance wise, I felt like Robin Williams was kind of almost playing Marlon Brando playing Popeye, which actually would have been a pretty cool casting choice, but I don't think Marlon Brando ever would have done it.
I could have been a contender.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, well, his character on the Waterfront's a little proto Popeye-ish, if you want to think of it that way.
Right. Dave, I was going to ask you, since I know that you were the one who didn't feel Robin Williams had much deserved this role or did this role justice. What did you think of the character overall?
As far as the character, I do feel. See, that's the thing. His character is contradicting. I think that Robin Williams did the character justice. It's just there wasn't much of a plot to begin with until the very end, and to me, I feel like the characters weren't as well developed around him as much, and I feel like Robin Williams was on a very short leash, and Robin Williams is better if you just let him go and let him do his thing. And to me, I liked the fact that he talked under his breath. I did like the moment where him and his pappy ended up like talking back and forth, like you're not my son, you're not my father, kind of a thing back and forth to each other, because they were like same grimace, same eyes, squinty eyes, same hype, and they're like, and the comedy between those two was kind of cool, but I don't know. There's just something about them flabby muscled arms that I just.
We'll go from flabby muscles to no muscles as we move to olive oil. And
I would rather him have him do a Hulk impression in this than just have them flaky ass muscles. And I'm sorry, but those arms don't really hold up.
I don't know about the rest of y'all, but when I saw her playing Olive Oil, I said to myself, Shelley Duvall was born to play this role.
Yeah, she was. Well, that was Roger Ebert said that about her famously. He said that she was born to play that role, and I completely agree. I think she was. That was probably the best casting of the film, probably the best casting of her career. I think, she looked the part. I love how she wears the ugliest clothes and yet insists that everything else around her is ugly or not sophisticated or whatever.
It's ugly.
Yeah, I think she's definitely given it her all, and she I think it's up there with like Christopher Reeve as Superman, and various other like select casting choices that you're like, yeah, that is the character leapt off the page into real life, And I do love her shoes. There's something about those shoes that I'm like, yeah, I could see that working. But go ahead.
I was gonna say I like how the character also evolved, because the character didn't start exactly like she was in the comic book. You got that feeling of independence from her, so you got to know her for her without Popeye involved. And then towards the end of the movie, when you actually see the romance build between the two, you get to see the traditional olive oil from the cartoon like entirely formed. So to me, I thought it was an excellent performance. I loved how the character evolved, as much as one can evolve in this cartoonish thing. But I just thought that she was probably the best played character in this.
In her defense, some of the things she said were ugly.
Yeah.
Oh, totally. Well, I mean, but the stuff that she was wearing wasn't much better. Honestly, I think that the heart and soul of the film is, and the song that I love especially, which I'll talk about when we get to songs, but the song that I love is the one David mentioned. I've been listening to it just on its own, ever since last night, and in the comments section of a YouTube video where someone uploaded it, I wasn't the only one where people were like, oh, it made me cry, it's so sweet, and that kind of stuff, but also the fact that their romance was so much the heart and soul of the film, particularly because they're both very odd characters. They look odd, they sound odd, they both have their own idiosyncratic mannerisms and speech patterns and things about them that a normal person would be like, what? And they don't really do the usual romantic things of like kissing or touching in a particularly romantic way, nothing like that. And yet the chemistry is palpable because they're both, they're so strange. They're so strange and so strange looking. And yet, they're both peas in a pod. They just don't know it yet.
That scene where they're together and he's talking about her caring about him, and they get closer and closer, and the expression, especially on her, you could just see that expression, and then she goes, "Phooey."
I know.
And then it moves on. It's like, that was perfect. I love the timing of it all. Shelley Duvall
they were able to take these cartoon characters, quite literally cartoon characters, and still be true to those characters as idiosyncratic and not normal as they are, and yet they found the humanity underneath all of that, and that is pretty. And they didn't have to wink to the camera, they didn't have to do any of the usual kind of dumbing the material down. It's like they played the characters as written, but they played them from their hearts, and it's like you can really tell.
So what about you, Dave? What did you think of Olive Oil's casting and Shelley Duvall?
I had conflicting thoughts about her too. Although I do think that the song that she sang, "He's large," that was kind of cute. But to me, Olive Oil has always been the damsel in distress.
Yeah.
And this character gave her a little bit more confidence.
Yeah.
But I think because of her experience with The Shining, it gave her a little bit of a damsel in distress kind of nature to the role. Halfway into the film, because Popeye, the thing about this Popeye is he's like a drifter, and he comes to port looking for his pappy, not looking for love necessarily. He doesn't really have money. He's kind of a pauper, and he just ends up accidentally at the place in which her mother needs a room and a board place, and she just happens to be marrying the dude that apparently everyone's afraid of, because he's a large man and apparently,
and he's got a unibrow.
Yeah,
Mm.
and it's like she runs into him and purposely makes it look like it's his fault, and then they end up finding Sweet Pea through some accidental suitcase luggage trade.
Well, let's not get too far into the plot, but definitely. Actually, Jake,
what little there is. I mean, the whole setup for their relationship and everything is totally like Clint Eastwood spaghetti western material.
What about you, Jake? Did you have anything else to comment on Olive Oil before we move on?
No, I think we pretty well covered it.
Well, let's talk Bluto. I mean, and by the way, I look at this as almost basically, I look at this as an origin story. I could see the cartoons and comics taking place after this because that dynamic would be there. But
it kind of is in a lot of ways. Like, apparently this was based heavily on the early comics. And like one thing, for example, it's kind of an important plot point of him finally eating spinach. And apparently in the comics, he did not really eat spinach. That was kind of introduced by the cartoons. So that was kind of like, that became an iconic thing because of the short films. But it was not so that was kind of an interesting nod to the origin of the character.
Well, it's a little bit like how Superman did not fly originally, and Kryptonite didn't get introduced until the radio show, and flying was in the theatrical cartoon shorts.
Now, one thing about you're getting ready to say on Bluto. One thing that I do think is kind of cool that I didn't realize until I was watching. I was like, he looks familiar, and I looked it up. Paul L. Smith plays Bluto. His last film credit was the Russian Archduke in Maverick. So it's like, that's kind of cool. He had a TV credit after that, but that was his last movie credit. So I was like, he looks familiar. But they really play Bluto as a ruffian and less than cultured.
Well, he's
large.
He's large. In all sorts of ways, I'm sure.
Yes.
It says on IMDb, if I like this movie, I would really like Toys. I don't know. I think those two movies do not.
Toys is all right. It had a wonderful.
I don't know if they relate very well though.
No.
They're both Robin Williams movies that the general public really didn't know what to do with, but apparently have kind of gone on to have a cult following.
Same thing. Well, I don't know if Flubber has a cult following, but
Toys I love watching.
I grew up with Flubber.
Okay.
So what about the rest of y'all on Bluto? What are y'all's thoughts on him? I mean, that part, to say, his anger part in that song that he sings there was great. Where he gets so angry he sees red on everything. I love that effect. But,
I like that too. I like the like that constantly for him.
The Raging Bull aspect.
Yeah.
In
the same year as Raging Bull.
I don't think I liked the song for him that he was singing. Entirely at that point in time, but I did like how he ate the silverware, or ate the dishes, or ate the teacup, wasn't it?
He was quite literally chewing the scenery.
And then, of course, I didn't mind the fact that he was she'll wed me not, or on the flower, and that.
Honestly, a lot of those scenes that you're mentioning, I think a lot of those could have been severely shortened, if not cut, just because, like, again, there's a lot in this movie that you could excise and come away with like an hour and a half at most, and I think it would have made for a tighter movie. There's just certain things that you're like, okay, that's not funny, or that song doesn't quite work, or whatever. So you could, if you excise those things, then you'd have a much better pace.
Well, so as far as others, I'm just going to go over ones that I think were important, and of course, I will leave it open for y'all to grab others after we finish. Now, one part that I thought was interesting was Poop Deck Pappy, which was played by Ray Walston. I don't know why I kept thinking Burgess Meredith played the part, which, by the way, he would have been excellent in that.
He would have, but Ray Walston.
The delivery was very similar to how he would have probably done it too.
Right.
But
another
Burgess Meredith could have played Popeye.
Well, yeah,
younger, yes, but yeah.
It could have been, yeah, but another familiar face. Of course, he would go on 2 years later to give Sean Penn crap in Fast Times, Mr. Hand. But I liked him as a character. I think he and Williams kind of favored each other, which was part of the point. But they really did. They really did play well off of each other. and they both start so very, very adamant that no, you couldn't possibly be there. and before long they can't deny it's like no one else on earth talks like the way they talk. So
I like that they make fun of his speech patterns in the beginning there, because I mean, anybody, I don't care that it's a cartoon world or whatever. But it's like, I think people even in a cartoon world would make fun of his speech patterns and the fact that he clearly has never heard of a thing called an eye patch or a false eye or anything like that. And his mutant arms,
Well, like one good example. one good example was that little speech Popeye gave to those people that were yucking up and laughing at him, and he's like, he kind of stands up to him. He's like, another thing I got is a sense of humiliation. Now, maybe Bob can pull your intelligence, can see that I'm asking you for an apology. It's like,
that's totally, totally a fistful of dollars. Exact same thing happens. Clint Eastwood's like, you insulted my horse, apologize, and they laugh at him and he shoots them. In this case,
I don't think Clint Eastwood talked like that, but
he
his horse did.
He had his own affectation.
Right. Yeah. It's some pretty good times, but they had a couple of the actually one of my favorite was when they go into the gambling den. Oh, what is this? A house of ill reputes? Oh, and we bring the infant to this den of immorality. Don't touch nothing. You might get a venerable disease.
I did like there were some very subtle, blue jokes thrown in there like that.
Oh, yeah.
Like a olive oil sounds like some kind of lubricant.
Exactly.
Dave,
which I mean, technically, oil of any kind is a lubricant, for mechanical purposes. So it counts.
So, Dave, did you have anything to say about Poop Deck Pappy?
There was a decided lack of poop on the poop deck, I have to say.
As far as what?
Oh, your thoughts on the character?
Was there enough poop on the deck?
Not exactly. Yeah, I think there needed to be some character development there.
So
you wanted more poop on the deck, is what you're saying?
Yes, I wanted more shit on the deck.
One great little character development that I did like that kind of showed just how close they really were is the part early on you see Popeye in his room. like talking to his papa, and you see him holding the picture. And then when he goes to put it up, he wrote on there, "Me Papa." And then later his dad looks at the one that says, "Me Son."
I love that. And it's fair to acknowledge the fact that this film and the strip, so it debuted in 1919, and so the film is trying to recreate a very specific version of what the early newspaper strips, what they would have in a caricatured fashion, how they would have represented the world around them. And so you're talking like 1910s moving into the early 1920s in like a rural kind of seafaring place. And so photography it's around, but it's definitely not commonplace and certainly not something that just any old person could afford. But I do think that's a great joke, but it's also a great representation of the times. Plus, like the fact that canning was canning was a necessity for sailors, and him getting fresh carrots would have been. There's a reason why those would have been more expensive for him, because they're not canned, they're fresh, but
was a nickel.
Yeah. But
speaking of other
that's
characters,
important,
any other? Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But any other characters? Let's see, wimpy, Jewish stereotype that probably wouldn't hold up today.
Right. Well, that's one he was just talking about.
Castor oil.
I did.
Yeah.
I did kind of enjoy the guy in the very beginning where he just kept kicking his hat all over the place.
Yeah, I like that guy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, there are a lot of characters in this that are very deliberate, but are also very of their time, and like you said, the very stereotypical, Jewish merchant, and you've got, I mean, even Popeye is a caricature of what I assume a grizzled older sailor of that time might have been like. And I like the tax man. I think he was particularly well played.
I love what was it like? Popeye manages to kind of throw him off the hook a little bit by what about those kids there? Curiosity tax a nickel or whatever it was. It's like
the tax man.
Yeah, he was
really well done.
Yeah.
And
illegal fight tax.
Oh yeah.
If it's illegal, then why is it going on?
Well, he asked the wrong question there. It's like he should have said, if it's illegal, how can you tax it? But I did think the tax man made an interesting through line.
Yes.
Didn't get much development as a character, but he did make some fun. And then, of course, Wimpy. Wimpy's a good one to talk about.
Pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today, which did come from the cartoon.
Right.
But
famous line, yeah.
Again, these are good characters. They're cartoony characters, and it does feel like a cartoon place. Sweet Haven is a cartoon town.
I mean, Wimpy basically is like the comic relief side character. I mean, that's really what he is, and there's nothing deep about him. He's just, he's the kind of character that shows up periodically to make you chuckle at his. He is a blatant mooch, basically. It's like,
well, but he's also pretty. He is a mooch, but he's also more clever than people give him credit for, because he's able to, get away with stuff he normally wouldn't be able to get away with. And the extra special shout out to the set that they built. Talking about a cartoon world. Extra special shout out to the set that they built, because it's still standing. To this day, it was built on the island nation of Malta, right off the coast of Italy, and it's still standing. And it's a popular tourist attraction called Popeye Town or Popeye Village, and
wow,
it's still standing. And
rather than Sweet Haven,
well, and it's that's what they call it. But isn't it interesting that like the oldest standing film set was the Paris Opera House from the 1925 Phantom of the Opera, and then they destroyed it to make way for a Harry Potter ride at Universal Studios Hollywood. But you know, Popeye Village is still standing, and it's being used and everything. You just have to go to Malta to see it, but you know, it's there. But you know, it's a beautiful set, and it recreates the cartoony world aspect, but it still looks functional. It doesn't, you know, look. It's not like full tilt like say the live action Dr. Seuss adaptations, where you're like, you know, it's so crazy. But then again, Dr. Seuss is also deliberately crazier than this. But you know, it achieves that right blend of reality, but also cartooniness.
Like that one wharf that you see at one point that's like a really long slide, and then it goes off, and it's like that was pretty fun. And I guess we'll throw out, while we're on the topic, the costumes were right out of the strip and right out of the comic, the show. I mean, like
totally,
the costuming was just perfectly tailored to that world. So I gotta give him props for that, definitely. As far as the other side characters, I also want to mention, I don't remember from the cartoon. I don't think they were major players. Maybe they were bigger in the strip, but Olive's family. I mean, you got to think like, well, if you got a name like Oil, you're going to have some fun with that. And they clearly did, because like her brother's name is Castor. Like her parents are Cole and Nana, which supposedly was supposed to be like banana oil. And then at one point, you know, they even kind of make fun of that a little bit, where it's like, you know, Williams is calling, I keep saying, you know, Popeye. I'm trying to stick with character names, but Popeye is like, you know, calling the baby Sweet Pea, and Olive Oil just complains about it, like that's just a terrible name or whatever. And he's like, well, what would you have me call him, Baby Oil? Like,
yeah, exactly.
They're not above making light fun of the source material, but they don't like do it. They don't do it in that pandering, like constantly winking to the camera kind of way, you know.
And apparently,
like
one of her
you could believe that those characters would say those things in that moment.
I wondered how many of the names were lifted directly from the source material. I'm sure most of them were, but like there's Olive's ex-boyfriend. I love how his name is Ham Gravy. It's like, okay, no wonder she dumped him.
I mean, yeah,
it's totally like how Dick. Well, I mean, this is a common thing for comic strip characters in general, but especially at the time, you know, that they were named after some aspect of themselves or whatever, or some kind of funny name or whatever. But like totally like Dick, like how, you know, Dick Tracy, you know, Dick meaning policeman, but also Dick is his name, you know, so it's got, you know, some kind of punny name or some name based on some physical feature or something like that. And he's called Popeye because he's only got one eye. I assume his other eye must have gotten popped out at some point.
Something along those lines.
If you were saying something.
Well, my thing is, I always seem to remember that Olive Oil in the cartoon was like tied to some railroad tracks, and Popeye was going after to save her, and Sweet Pea was tied too, and you know, and I was hoping to get a railroad scene with them in this movie, and we didn't.
I don't know. He tied her up and put her into like the one of the horns of the ship.
Well, there's not a lot of railroads going to Sweet Haven, because one of the opening lyrics is, you know, God must love us. Why else would he strand us here? Great line.
Well, why don't we?
So Dave, they may have been planning that for the sequel, you know.
Why
don't we?
They didn't know it was going to bomb.
So the plot, I'm just going to run down really quick.
Yeah, you can do that
I'm
very
gonna just run it
quickly.
in. I'm just gonna run it in pieces. Piece one is essentially the introductory piece where Popeye arrives at Sweet Haven. You have the song introducing it. People are not very welcoming to strangers. You get that in the town, and eventually he's introduced to the Oils as they're the only ones who didn't get the news that a stranger's in town. So
They almost did.
they weren't able to turn their room for rent sign over. So I think that's a pretty good establishing the fall. So what did y'all think of the setup? Just the whole setup with the song introducing the town and introducing the Oils and the family, and really the basic plot points, because they also talk about the marriage to Pluto and all that stuff in that.
Yeah,
I love the opening song of Sweet Haven. I think that's a great. Every musical's got to have a really good opening number, and it definitely does. Which again, plot wise, I've said it reminded me so much of A Fistful of Dollars. But it works, in a musical context. It's not so much that the casual audience wouldn't need to know that that it's emulating a lot of that kind of stuff.
Oh,
that's some interesting technical difficulties there.
That was. Well, I agree. There was a lot going on there in terms of basic world building, if you will. Not that they need a lot of world building for this, but I think, wow, we're losing everyone. Whoa, what's going on, Dave? So we, there we go. Everyone's back. I think.
And we all got kicked.
Yeah, that was weird.
That was nuts.
So, I'm back in.
Yeah. I will say one thing, though, and I wonder if I'm the only one. Does anyone else think Sweet Haven seems like an unusual name for a fishing village? Because usually you think of it being something really weird and macabre, like Hangman's Bluff kind of thing,
Well, I think it's more of like a Cape of Good Hope sort of name
right.
system.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you love to see like a Lovecraftian take on this, where it's just called Sweet Haven, and it's got the creepy, rotting sign, and Popeye comes into town and it's like a bunch of fish people, just like out of the Shadow over Innsmouth.
Now they did have Scab Island.
Popeye versus fish people. I could totally see that.
Right. Yeah, there you go. And then there you go, Dave. You can figure out some sort of death-defying trap to go into that particular setup,
What about you, Dave? What do you think of the setup of that setup portion?
The setup of the ending, or the setup of the
opening number.
Just that beginning thing. Yeah, the whole opening, like where he goes from that and gets introduced.
I think the town singing is sleepy. Like everyone is like tired. It's kind of like a poverty-ish, like Charles Dickens-y, like somberness. It's very depressing to me. To me, I when I think of Popeyes, I think of upbeat, not downbeat. So
I thought the song was very upbeat, but their circumstances are very Dickensian. If you want to go there, the kind of the American equivalent of Dickensian.
I didn't see a lot of there. It was more of a. It was just more of a bunch of cartoony characters living and breathing in this world, and this is what they know. And for the most part, they get along and they live their day-to-day lives reasonably happy.
But not so kind to outsiders.
Well, I thought of. Well, what made me think of, besides just like the stranger wandering into a town that's unfriendly thing, the other thing that made me think of like spaghetti westerns also, because they use the same trope of like this town is generally like in the middle of nowhere. It's full of ordinary people, but having to live hard lives. The land is not fruitful and bounteous, and there's usually at least one oppressive figure who's keeping them all in line. In this case, it's Bluto, who's kind of taking over for whoever the harbor master who's not around much. And it's like that's a good setup for any kind of
Commodore.
environment. Yeah, the Commodore. Sorry, not the harbor master. But it's like that's a good setup to go into your story. But it also makes sense why they're trying to sing, because and even in those otherwise kind of happy sounding number, it's like they're stranded there. It must be an island of some kind, kind of small one, because like it doesn't seem like they're really connected to civilization outside of what can pull into shore one day.
Yeah. Well, and of course, it's the thing is illustrated again by the whole Oils house. Everything's kind of falling apart, but I always thought of it as comical. And Sweet Haven is kind of a weird mixed bag, because there is kind of a seaside paradise vibe to it, because you still have the beautiful water. You've got a lot of the area, and even the people, they're able to live outside for the most, because the weather is usually nice, except for the very beginning of the movie, and that's it's kind of fun. But I guess we'll move on. Of course, Popeye rents from them and learns that Olive Oil is betrothed to Mary Bluto, who runs things again for the Commodore, who's this mysterious figure who's never been seen. And we also established that he's looking for his dad. Now, we move forward from there. We have the food song, which established Popeye's ability to fight. And, the aftermath of the food song does. And, I mean, they even named the place the Rough House. And I think that's actually a fairly important plot point to sit on. We're not going to sit, like, beat for beat, but this one in particular, I thought had some importance. I mean, what do y'all think of that whole, the song then moving into the fight?
Well, it sets up the fact that everybody, they're living in hard times. I mean, this was pre-depression, but even before, like, Roaring 20s or whatever, even before World War I ended, the times were tough. And, it shows that, especially for working class people. Plus, this scene is important because it shows that Popeye does everything he can to avoid a fight, but if he's in a fight, he's going to finish it. And he's definitely got the skills to back it up.
Another thing is that there is a presence of a tax collector in this whole thing. So I wonder if this is a play on like taxes that were like in say a city of Boston, and the fact that Popeye actually threw him into the lake, that was a symbolic thing to like the throwing over the Boston Tea Party, or
Right.
So I wonder if that wasn't.
You just docked. I has. Let's see here. That'd be 25-cent docking tax. What for? Where's your sea craft? Ain't no sea craft. It's my dinghy, and it's under the wharf. This your goods? They is. Yeah, you're new in town, right? If you call this a town, yes. Well, first of all, there's a 17-cent new in town tax, and there's 45-cent rowboat under the wharf tax, and $1 leaving your junk lying around the wharf tax. So altogether, you owe the Commodore $1.87. He does that sort of thing all through the movie. It's like,
and he carries quite a bit of
right.
You get a little like as he's moving in and puddling around.
I do think like there may have been some symbolism in the tax collector. I think it was probably more for comedy than anything else, but it might have been a little bit of biting commentary too on, kind of like, it reminds me a little bit of like the Beatles song "The Taxman," which is a great song, by the way. But it's it's that same sort of deal. You get the impression that that's probably this dude's, this dude probably loves the song and doesn't realize that it's making fun of him. But
yeah, I think so. It's, and again, I think the whole thing is good, and you get to see your first glimpse of Bluto, and Bluto's just sitting there eating, and you've got the stack of plates and a big old thing of meat there. Establishes Wimpy a little bit more with his hamburgery.
Yeah. And also how quickly he is to. But also establishes how happily he will befriend anyone who offers him a.
Now, Jay's having those problems.
What's up? Oh.
Okay, let's see.
What's up?
Trouble connecting.
My
Wi-Fi.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm having technical issues too, but I mean that scene is pretty critical just because it does, like, him throwing the tax man overboard. That does kind of endear him to these townspeople that are, I'm sure, unfairly oppressed by the tax man, and just the other petty torments of Bluto and that sort of thing. Another little random factoid. So like having consistent prices for things when you buy things at a store, that's a relatively recent innovation. Like the whole thing of the haggling that Popeye gives with the merchant. Yeah, I'll pay what I feel like paying. That whole thing. That was apparently more common back then than in that time period than we like to think. So that's kind of an interesting factoid there. Plus, people not always dealing fairly with each other and trying to swindle each other out of the whole cheeseburger thing.
I like how he kept asking for the carrots, and the merchant kept trying to sell him everything else, and he was giving him these great prices. And finally gives him this bad price on the carrots, and he's like, well, why are you charging so much more on the carrots? And he's like, well, I charge more on this stuff I don't feel like selling.
Yeah. Well, but I could understand it from a practical perspective, because fresh produce is always pricier than canned goods, even today. But I mean, it's I can understand also as a sailor why he would want something fresh, because he's probably been so used to eating canned food on boats and stuff, and he's like, I want something fresh. But I do like the fact that he doesn't want the spinach up until he realizes that it makes him really powerful. And I know that whole trope got introduced before it became commonplace. I'm sure mothers were saying to their kids, eat your vegetables, but it wasn't like as drilled into your brain as it is today, from a young age. But that's the thing I always liked about Popeye, was that he always ate his spinach, and his spinach is what gave him the strength. And it's like, that was, I think you talk about things that haven't really aged well, like the Jewish stereotype and like the fact that he even has a pipe and everything. That aspect of it was way ahead of its time. That was way ahead of its time.
Oh, yeah. Most likely. It's I think that they did a good job. I like how in the fight scene in the bar, which they call the again, I thought that was fun, and they make that call a number of times, but where they got the girl, she lowers the cage down over. It's like, just another fight, and they all know what's coming. So that leads over into our anniversary, our engagement party with the oils. Now, I thought, of course, this was a useful thing. It helped introduce Bluto more. You had his mean song, which, like it or not, it does give him a quality of what kind of person he is, and it gives him a little bit more than just the silent, angry guy look. And then, of course, Olive Oil is talking about that large song,
That
about how much she likes
constantly.
the guy, but she's using it more as a cover in order to just leave because she's indecisive as heck, and eventually runs into Popeye outside because apparently nobody wants to talk to him, stranger, danger, and they get a hold of the child at the time because the mother. It's this interesting thing, basically, where the mother says, I just need some time to get myself together, about 25 years or so. So these types of little touches, and of course, when they come back into the house, Bluto sees them together with the baby, gets PO'd, beats the crap out of Popeye because you get to also establish that he is stronger than Popeye, even though Popeye is strong. And then his favorability towards Olive Oil changes, resulting in them having all the arrears taxes levied. So that's a lot to digest, but what are your thoughts on that section?
Well, I think it's good to see, so you see that Popeye's a good fighter in the bar. You see that he's a good fighter in the ring, so he can go up against this Man Mountain. So it's not just your normal street toughs. He's good against someone that could compete in the ring, and he has
and
to
they space them around
use.
So they don't just he's fighting and gets beaten up, and then he also shows he's still good. I agree. Because that fight came after he got his butt handed.
Well, and I suppose it kind of helps that we have the character actress from Exorcist. Was it Exorcist?
I don't know who you're talking about.
The mother of the wrestler that they ended up.
Oh no, that was you're talking about the really small woman.
Yeah,
that was Linda Hunt. This was supposedly, I think, her first movie. Let me double check. No. Yeah, this was her first movie. She had a couple TV appearances before that. She did play the barkeep in Silverado, and she was in Dune and a whole bunch of other movies over the years.
I remember. I remember who she is now.
Yeah, but apparently starred in the show Carnival. I still need to see that. But but actually, Dave, you probably know. I know he's a Western fan. I'm sure you know Silverado.
I know Silverado.
Yeah, so there you go. Right.
All right. Well, the whole thing with Sweet Pea's arrival, that really jumpstarts both Popeye and Olive Oil's character developments. That jumpstarts their characters on a whole different course because they have to be fatherly and motherly, respectively. Even though Popeye says that he's going to be his mother.
I think at one point he had I think one of the lines he had was something like, "I'm not man enough to be a mother."
Exactly, which was really funny, but that was a really great line. But point being is as happens with real life couples, the arrival of a child forces upon them, a lot of growth and everything. Now, the arrival of Sweet Pea brings out the best in both Popeye and Olive Oil because they cease a lot of their superficiality and they really have to dig down deep. The way that that's handled, I think, is some of the best stuff in the movie because it's very subtle. And they still are who they are. They're still these weird cartoon people, but they have to be the best versions of themselves because now they've got someone else to think about, and that's handled really, really well.
And did we talk about Sweet Pea as a character because he's actually a pretty cool character.
He's an unusual child and a clairvoyant, apparently.
Yeah, I know.
And a clairvoyant.
Yeah. But honestly, though, like, you know, for that sort of a role, like just the little baby character, they really got some really impressive takes out of him, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that I do think also, Dane, you had definitely a point with that what you were saying earlier. I think nothing establishes that more than when they sing the song "Stay with Me," where they go in and you can see Shelley Duvall's character looking at him, though he's not noticing that, which it really shows that she's really noticing him as they go on. I thought that the subtlety was very well handled. And
well, the way that song plays is so special because they are singing both to Sweet Pea what they want for him, which is so kind of stereotypically like, you know, if you're gonna, you know, beat the other kids' faces in the other kids in the bush, you know, that whole thing. And then she's like, we're gonna have a quiet cottage, we're gonna play house, you know, which all of that's very stereotypical. But then like they're singing to Sweet Pea what their hopes and dreams are for him, but then they're also singing to and about each other because they can tell that there's something inside that's missing and they want, you know, someone else to share the journey. And it's all, you know, sail away with me on the one hand, and then it's stay with me on the other hand. Yeah. So it's kind of them pleading to each other, but also to Sweet Pea for what they want for him. So it's just a beautifully executed scene.
And so on the whole idea of Sweet Pea as a clairvoyant, they of course they have the fight scene, and I do agree the fight scenes are great to space them out, having him show that he can fight beforehand, and showing that he can take a big guy like that even after he has had his defeat handed to him by Bluto. Was really good, especially having that giant like figure fall when he knocks the guy out. But also establishing Sweet Pea's clairvoyancy and them using that, but also making that a plot device where Bluto comes back into the plot and takes and abducts Sweet Pea after the I Am What I Am song, and him basically saying, screw y'all, I can't trust y'all. Not long after that, he gains the trust of the town by beating up the tax man accidentally. And then Sweet Pea goes missing. And there's a lot to digest, but not really, if you think about it.
Yeah, it's pretty simple stuff.
The confidence of everybody, but I mean, whereas he's able to gain the confidence of everybody else in the town, he loses the one that one of the ones he truly loves and holds respect for, which is the baby.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, the whole quest to get Sweet Pea back, you know, that's when this otherwise fairly plotless movie, you know, when it starts to get a plot, just like MASH, how MASH didn't really have a plot until the third act. But like that whole thing is when it starts to resemble what I assume is like a standard Popeye kind of plot, you know, rescue the damsel from the bad guy and rescue the baby and all that stuff, which, you know, that whole thing is executed fairly well, except I know that the octopus, they tried to get that thing to work in a way that it just simply would not work. And so, you know, some of it's a little
Goonies.
Yeah. I mean, it ain't 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea in terms of that was a giant squid, but it's like it's not that, but it's also not Bride of the Monster either. You know, so let's count our blessings there. But I did like the when he beats the octopus underwater, that there's like nothing in the head sack region. It's just like empty, And it's like you could tell, like it was apparently they didn't. Well, the whole film they didn't really get shot everything they wanted to get shot, and you could tell like that whole scene. It's like if they could have had a better looking octopus, or one that functioned more like they wanted it, then it might have made for a more spectacular climax.
Right.
And he does meet his father, who is the mysterious Commodore, and of course the whole plot line. Then you realize that Bluto was working for the Commodore to find this hidden treasure that Commodore keeps talking about. And once he gets Sweet Pea, he realizes, now I've got what I need. Now I can go after it. And betrays the Commodore and goes to Scab Island, which I like that name, Scab Island. But which does show the conflict, final conflict between Popeye and Bluto, and of course him eating the spinach and saving.
Which you gotta love that. You gotta love that the spinach was the treasure. I think
and
that says a lot right there.
About the child.
Yeah.
Well, that says a lot about who he is, about who his father is, but also that it's not about material things. It's about your fresh fruits and vegetables, or in this case, your canned fruits and vegetables.
And his
no, I'm not going to eat my spinach.
Which I'm sorry to say, I do really like fresh spinach very much. I think that's really nice. Canned spinach, I'm sorry to say, I think it's pretty gross.
Ever since I ate fresh spinch, I have never liked canned spinach as much again.
Yeah,
but
it's more about
all I knew was canned spinach. So I was good with it back then.
It's more about the principle of it. The fact that a big burly man like Popeye, he eats his vegetables, and so therefore that's what gives him the power.
Right.
And of course, they have to end the film with "I'm Popeye the Sailor Man." They have to end it that way, which is very appropriate.
Hello?
It's a classic song.
Yeah, of course.
What? What's up?
You're breaking up.
Yeah, you're breaking up.
Yeah.
Well, I mean that is how the movie ends, with the recitation of "I'm Popeye the Sailor Man," and they have the dance and everything, and it's like it's more like everything's to the status quo from what we know from the character and everything. It's a very much an Altman style plot structure. 2 acts full of incidents, and then 1 act full of something resembling a plot. But the plot that is there is very reminiscent of what I understand the comic strip and the cartoons were like. Those kind, and cartoony hijinks ensue and all that stuff. But and much like what we saw with like Dick Tracy, how things achieve a sense of a status quo by the end. But I mean, the plot is just very, surface level kind of. It serves the basic framework. What really I think drives the movie is each individual comedic bit, but also it is a musical. So I mean, we'll probably want to talk about music at some point. I love Harry Nilsson.
That's where we go now.
Yeah, I love Harry Nilsson as a singer. I mean, he did Everybody's Talking from one of my favorite movies, Midnight Cowboy, and I know that some people were kind of put off by the songs, like they felt like they didn't entirely work. And I'm sort of half and half. Like there are definitely some stinker songs in here, but then the songs that are good are really good. Like the song title is Sailin', but the chorus is about, stay with me, all that stuff. Like, that's a beautiful song. Love it, love it, love it. As well as the song He Needs Me, which was very famously remixed and reused in one of my favorite movies, Punch Drunk Love. And I realized, it comes from this, which, Paul Thomas Anderson's early career he owed entirely to Robert Altman stylistically.
And actually, Anderson shadowed him on Prairie Home Companion. He would have stepped in if Altman had to leave.
Which would have made sense, but that just tells you the genius of Paul Thomas Anderson. He took a song from a movie that not a lot of people saw, that wasn't really critically well loved or financially successful or anything. He took a song from there, repurposed it, added some more orchestral elements, and turned it into a beautiful piece of music, even more beautiful than it already was, in a movie that also not a lot of people saw, but was much more critically lauded. But I overall like the music very much.
And to me, as one of the only ones here who actually watched this as a child, I have to say that the majority of the songs were quite fun as a child, to a child. Even the ones that were not necessarily so nice. The whole of it, I think, was good establishment. So you have to kind of look at this as a family film, and I do think that most of the songs set up well. I mean, to this day, I love the All You Need Is Food song and Sweet Haven, just establishing songs. I like the I Am What I Am song. I even like the I'm Mean song, because it kind of just set up Bluto as who he was. I like the majority of the songs. There were a few I wasn't like in love with, but at the same time, seeing this movie as many times I have from a child, I have all these songs totally memorized. So it's one of those rare things. But most of us have had those type of things where we could probably speak the line of any of these films that we loved or had growing up, and that's how it is.
My thing, when I take a look at kind of like the production, how much trouble they had and how much trouble it seems like Robin Williams had with Robert Altman, it seems like because of that trouble, to me, the music falls flat and doesn't really pack a punch enough. Even the song between Popeye and Olive Oil, even that seems kind of strained to me as a song, because Olive Oil, or at least Shelley Duvall, is very soft spoken.
Yeah, well, she's not much of a singer, but honestly, I think that, like, it worked for me in that number and in He Needs Me, because I think her voice matches the strangeness of that character. I don't expect her to be topping the charts or anything, but I think it fits the character. And again, it could even work, like I mentioned with Punch Drunk Love, it worked in that context too, because those two characters were odd in their own respect, and her voice is rather odd. So it's like, it works for the kind of story they're trying to tell. But again, I don't expect it to top the charts or anything.
I just don't find the music as upbeat as the film should be. I mean, to me, tempo should be definitely more upbeat. It just sounds like a sad orchestra to me.
You're getting a lot more sadness out of this movie than I think is necessarily intended.
It's a dreary town. The people are like in some kind of a poverty mode, and they're singing in a sleepy voice. It's like,
but
God.
that's the period right there. That's the period. People are not doing well.
Let's look at the material that's in the back of it. I know that at least I know at least one of you is not a fan of Doug from Nostalgia Critic, but
Oh, Doug Walker, yeah.
but I do want to say some stuff about, because he does a show on his
Disney
channel,
December.
Channel Awesome. No, the strain, no, Dark Tunes, which I really like that one, because again, he talks about a lot of cartoons that are very dark, and Popeye is a good illustration, where he covers a Popeye cartoon about a guy who literally is trying to kill himself constantly throughout, and eventually Popeye gets fed up, and you hear the bullet at the end, where Popeye basically in the dark just says, "Screw it, I'm going to kill you then, if that's what you want." And but that just shows you how dark that character in the series was. It was not a happy-go-lucky thing when it goes on. It had a lot of, so that's why I think that the tone fits very well. Is, yes, it kind of puts a happy-go-lucky paint on the outside, much like the establishment of the Sweet Haven thing, where they're singing this kind of weirdly positive song, but you see everything else in this weird decaying light.
God must love us. Why else would he strand us here? You know, it's right there. And
all of the apartments and stuff are kind of run down in the cartoons, because again, they're living in poverty. They're living through rough times a lot of the times throughout. So in a way, I do think that a lot of our thoughts in childhood, we don't notice these little bits, but when you go back and you look at the stuff, you realize, oh yeah, this kind of fits.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of darkness at the heart of a lot of children's media, not just from the old days, but recently too. Darkness in areas where you don't even necessarily expect it, but it's definitely there. Which I mentioned Disney December because I remember first getting exposed to this film in any kind of respect because Doug did cover it for Disney December, even though it's only partially a Disney film. But he brought that up specifically because it was one of the few times that Disney ever did anything with another studio. So it technically counts as a Disney film. But I do remember he covered it for Disney December. But
so is Olive Oil a Disney princess?
I'm with you. I guess at least half a Disney princess, because it's half a Disney film. But I'm with you though. I mean, there's a lot of darkness at the heart of a lot of comic strips. I mean, we covered Dick Tracy, and it's like that was a very dark strip for its time. A lot of violence and stuff. And
I mean, look at the time that it was established. Popeye's comic strip was established during a time not unlike our own. The Spanish flu
in 1919
was rampant at the time. People were dying constantly out there. It was just after World War One. It was a
which
rough
might
time
have been
for people.
part of the reason for the ultimate fixation on spinach.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
well, I mean that's why I brought up how hard living everybody was, and how especially for someone like Popeye, who's a sailor, he's been traveling around, he's probably eaten his fill of canned foods because that's what they lived on, is canned goods. But yeah, I mean, I like in a lot of older media, they don't shy away from the fact that life is tough. No matter what, life is tough, and they don't shy away from that.
And we've touched on the production design, and we're kind of talking about it now anyway.
Right.
With the town of Sweet Haven, I mean, the fact that it's still there is kind of funny, and but at the same time, it's a decrepit yet beautiful town. I don't know if that makes sense.
But yeah, well, there's a certain amount. If you look at like ghost towns and towns that are in decay and that kind of stuff, you can be kind of depressed about it, and in a lot of ways it is depressing, but there is also kind of an odd beauty to it because you see nature kind of taking back, what humans had, sought to put their stamp on. So, I mean, there are two ways to look at it, plus the fact that they're singing in these otherwise rather dire circumstances. That's something that's very real. People make up songs and stories and try to find the good in otherwise horrible situations. And so I mean that's why making it a musical, it's a deliberate artistic choice, but I think also even taking that out of it, the fact that they have people that are singing or trying to find the music in an otherwise, harsh existence, that's very true to the period also.
And it is I do like it overall, I think, and also makeup and hairstyling also does well. The fact that they did that, they did the olive oil cut on Shelley Duvall, the costumes that they put her in, she looked like the character. I know,
Yeah,
I
I
know,
agree.
Dave, you talked about how you dislike kind of like the makeup on Popeye. You didn't feel like you looked like the cartoon character, but I thought it did. I mean, not the face, but I do think like he did great with the squinty eye, the pipe, the bulgy arms but bulging not where you expected to bulge, which was the funny part about the character, is because his forearms were huge, but his like biceps were like non-existent in the cartoon.
Which again, it's like, what kind of deformed mutant are you? And I mean, but again, that definitely goes to the heart of the character, because he's strong, but he's also odd, but he's also, he's a grizzled sailor, but he's got a good heart and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, he's a very interesting, fascinating character that has more layers than you might think. Well, though he still has never heard of an eye patch. I don't know why.
Well, he has to be prepared because he has to fight the ghost of Bruce Lee later on in the Dragon Lives Again.
I guess so. But I think that goes, like, just how weird he looks and how weird Olive Oil looks and behaves and all that. That's why they fit so well together, because he's this burly guy, but burly in ways you don't expect, and then she's this rail thin, character, and it's like they fit.
Anything else about music, costume design, set design, Dave, Jake?
Nothing really leaps to mind. I think we've covered a good chunk of it.
That's Dave?
Yeah.
Not that I know of. I mean, to me, I guess I'm gonna have a little bit of an issue with everything because of how dreary everything is. So to me, it doesn't hold up to me as much as it does to other people. I respect the character Popeye. I respect the characters involved in the film, and one thing I would like to say is the character of Poop Deck. I remember his character well on the Stand. So I thought I'd mention that because he was on the Stand, and if I remember correctly, wasn't he my favorite Martian?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. So. Other than that, I mean, I enjoyed watching it again. I mean, I know that my fiance, Tammy, she got into the slapstick humor a little bit. I wasn't laughing like she was, and I guess that that is that.
I went ahead and I linked it because he also tagged teams with James Rolfe in it too, so that might pique your interest as well, Dame.
That will be interesting.
You're talking before I forget, but Dave was mentioning other interesting connections. One other interesting connection, and then I'll be done with it. Paul Dooley, who plays Wimpy, did another film with Robin Williams 32 years later, I think. They were both in Insomnia. Slightly different film. Slightly different.
One of his more serious films, to be honest.
Yeah. Oh, I thought Williams deserved a lot more praise for Insomnia.
And slightly darker than Popeye.
Slightly darker. Well, you're talking about, Popeye killed a man. Well, there you go. In that one, he killed a little girl. Well, not a teen, but you know what I mean.
So,
And 1 Hour Photo was in the same year, and he plays a stalker there.
Exactly.
That was a very dark year for Robin Williams, wasn't it?
It was. Death to Smoochie as well.
Oh God!
That's talk about an underrated movie.
Well, let's talk about what was it? Let's talk about favorite scenes.
Okay.
But I want to add something as well. Not just favorite scenes, but favorite song, because the musical. So why don't we start with Jake? What's your favorite scene and your favorite song from the
I'll be honest, most of the songs did not distinguish themselves to me. I could not tell you one from the other, except for the main theme that everyone knows. It's a good song, and I like its presence in the movie. As far as favorite scenes and whatnot, maybe the scene, you were talking about, like the food song scene, like the post fight part of that. Mainly, it certainly had some of my favorite lines, like those lines from Wimpy that I really love. That one part where Robin Williams, Popeye, was demanding an apology, and all the other characters were apologizing. Overall, I thought that was an amusing scene. And the scene with him finally meeting his old man was also a pretty amusing scene. Mostly, this is another one of those ones where it's like a little bit here, a little like a line here, a line there. I've already mentioned most of the lines that come to mind that I really enjoyed, but yeah.
Most definitely.
Mm-hmm.
So, how about you, Dane? What's your favorite scene and then your favorite song?
Favorite scene easily is the bit in the middle where they're singing to Sweet Pea, I think. And I'm not normally one to get all sentimental over look at the baby scenes in movies, like, because I've seen a million of those. But like, out of all of those, I think that one was done so amazingly well because it's a beautiful song and because there's a lot of subtext going on with it's their hopes and dreams for Sweet Pea, but it's their hopes and dreams for each other. And they don't even realize just how much they're communicating to each other. I think it's executed amazingly well. Favorite song would have been He Needs Me, but the version of it that's in here is not quite as good as the one that's in Punch Drunk Love because they added some more orchestral elements and that kind of stuff. And I think it's used a little bit better in Punch Drunk Love. And also just because I'd heard it before, as much as I love that song, it's like, oh, that's where that's from. It wasn't like my first time hearing it. But so I would give it up to Sailin', which is the song in the scene that I mentioned. That's what it's called. Because I'm a big fan of songs that are really kind of small. They're very simple. They're very kind of contained and intimate and all that stuff, especially when it's on that kind of subject. You're singing to someone that you love. In this case, it's like someone that you're responsible for, a child, but also, your presumed soulmate, so it works on two different levels. And it's just very sincere, very simple, and it's like I keep listening to it, so I'm like, well, obviously it did its job. And it's one of those songs that it's like, you get a little teary-eyed listening to it because you're like, there are certain songs that you hear it and you're like, yep, that's what it's all about, and that's one of those songs.
All right.
I would have to say that my favorite song would probably be the song that was sung between Robin Williams and Shelley Duvall with Sweet Pea. My second favorite would probably be Large. He's Large. I'm gonna remember it.
He should have repurposed that song for Boogie Nights.
He's large. Well, If they
Make it about Dirk Diggler.
Well, if they had she's a brick house, you know. Instead, maybe that might have worked for Olive Oil. He's a brick house.
Yeah, I'm not sure Brick House would quite fit for her, but you know.
she's more like she's more like an outhouse, because outhouses are very small and skinny and all that.
That's an unpleasant thought.
Yeah, once she's stuck in the pipe, I guess she could be an outhouse.
There you go.
On that
note.
But
and she dresses like shit, so.
Oh man.
So,
we are very much reimagining this story at this point.
Well,
doesn't this work better when we actually follow to script?
Well, his dad is named Poop Deck Pappy, so I mean we've already got shit in there. So
true.
Lovely.
In this day and age, catching shit for a living is actually worth a hell of a lot of money. So maybe it could have brought them out of that depression.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But in any case, go ahead.
So I was gonna say my favorite scene. I love the food. I don't know. Everything is food. Just I don't know. It's just a fun scene for me. I enjoy it. So I would go with that as my favorite scene and song, actually, because I like the song as well. So hey, it works for me there.
All right.
The as far as this whole thing, I think that it's a good film, and I hope you all at least got some enjoyment, except for Dave, who obviously did not.
I enjoyed what I could. It's just it was a hard watch for me. So.
But otherwise, like I say, I hope everybody enjoyed this, and we look forward to covering more fun films. But I will go ahead and hand this back to Dave as we wrap up.
Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, get ready for another exciting discussion here, where we will be discussing on the Inside Movies Galore channel, Snowpiercer. So hopefully you enjoyed our meanderings here, and like, share, and subscribe, and hopefully you'll be able to join us back here next time with some more. What was it again, Dane? It
was non-superhero comic adaptations, specifically from Western comics.
So stay tuned for some more exciting film discussions.
Indeed.